I'd like to introduce you to Maureen Breeze. Maureen joins us from Denver, Colorado. She actually wrote our leadership textbook that we use here at Silver Creek High School and Leadership Academy. So we're really excited to have her with us this evening. She also does stuff with academic coaching, is an artist at the Denver School of the Arts, sorry, yes, I forgot about that. And she also goes around and speaks on various topics for students around the country. So give it up for Maureen Breeze.
So just to tie in what we were talking about before, this idea of appreciating one another, I would like to appreciate Doug. Fabulous. And what I found so exciting about it was his level of professionalism with every email, with every bit of communication from start to end. Very impressive. So thank you, and I'm excited to be here. A lot of the work I do around leadership with students is around cultivating passion and purpose, because if we do have that place of passion and that we're very committed to, it's so much easier to lead. But reality is, oftentimes we're called to lead in areas that we might not be particularly passionate about. I'm sure Dr. Hatter was not that excited about leading through the accounting crisis, right? So it really comes down to having the leadership skills that we can lead in areas of passion and purpose, but when we can also lead in areas of struggle, where we have to impact our community after a tragedy, where we have to lead our family with their difficult challenges. So when I started thinking about the essential leadership skills that I would want to talk about tonight, I decided to focus on asking questions. How can we ask the questions we need to be effective in leadership? So I'm going to kind of start with that and this idea of what is the world asking for with our leaders today? First of all, we need leaders with vision, right? As we move into this global world, we're dealing with pollution problems, environmental problems, global trade problems. We need leaders with big vision to be able to handle some of those problems. We need leaders who are critical and creative thinkers, who are innovators, who are going to be creating the industries that will fuel our economy in the 21st century. So I was reading an interesting book by Tyler Cohen, who's an economist at George Mason University, and the book is titled Average is Over. And in it he cites that after the Great Recession, 2/3 of the new jobs that have entered our economy have an average wage of $13.25 an hour. So that is not going to be the type of job that is going to be able to support the middle class and fuel our economy. So we're going to need leaders who have those innovation skills and those creative skills that can create new industries and new jobs for our economy. And then finally, we're going to need leaders who are going to be able to manage the intersection of technology and humanity. There are a lot of unintended consequences with the technologies that we have today, and we're going to need leaders with the vision and the ability to be able to manage some of those challenges. So I thought it'd be interesting, before we get into this concept of looking at questions, that we would look at this survey that was done. They asked all the Fortune 500 companies what were the most important skills that they looked for when they were hiring graduates to come into their companies. And you'll see at the top writing, computation and math skills, reading skills, and then it goes on into some other areas. Now imagine they did that survey today. What do you think would be the skills that would be most in demand? You can just shout it out. Creative thinking. What else?
Computer skills.
Yep. Computer skills. What else? Leadership. Okay, they did this survey in the year 2000. Let's look at what they came up with. Teamwork. Number 1. Problem-solving skills. Interpersonal skills. Oral communication. Let's look at where writing is. Number 10. Computation skills, 12. Reading skills, 13. And it's not that we don't need professionals who are able to read, write, and do math. But in today's complex world, we need leaders and employees who are able to do so much more on top of that. But specifically, I want to look at number 2, problem-solving skills. And what's at the heart of being able to solve problems? the ability to identify it. And we only can do that through asking questions. So I'm going to spend the rest of my time talking about what are the questions we, as leaders in our community, as leaders in our professions, have to be able to ask. The first, what do I want to do with my life? We spend a lot of time asking high school students and college students that. What do you want to do? What do you want to be? But we oftentimes don't realize that's a question we have to ask ourselves continually. Not only what do I want to do with my life, but what impact do I want to have? What influence do I want to create? And so here's a story of a woman that I think is quite inspirational, who faced this question, Taraya Trent. She grew up in Africa. She went to school through 2nd grade. By the time she was 11, she was married, and she quickly had 5 children. She was in an abusive marriage, very, very poor village, and a woman came to their village to help bring some economic sustainability programs. And she befriended this woman. And one day the woman asked her, Taraya, what do you want to do with your life? And she thought about it. And she quietly grabbed a piece of paper and a pencil, and she wrote down, I want to come to America. I want to get my bachelor's degree. I want to get my master's degree, and then I want a PhD. Those were pretty bold goals for somebody who finished 2nd grade. But she carefully folded up her paper and put it in a tin can and buried it in the earth. She didn't forget about it, but she continued to sow those seeds. She talked to people in her village. She shared her dreams. People started to rally around her. They sold a cow. They did different things to help raise money. She applied to Oklahoma State University and got in. Moved over here to the U.S. with her children and her husband, who at that point was sick with AIDS. When she was working on a bachelor's degree, she was taking care of her kids and nursing her husband. She ended up having to drop out of school multiple times because she couldn't pay her tuition and had other problems. She had a friend that worked at Walmart who would tell her when they would put the expired vegetables out to trash, and she would go there in the middle of the night and get food to feed her children. Well, she stayed strong with her dreams and her visions. She did receive her BA. She received her master's. And 2 years ago, she walked across the stage accepting recognition at Case Western University for her PhD. And today, she is running programs in Africa to build economic sustainability for the young women and children in her village. But she said none of that would have been possible if someone wouldn't have looked her in the eye and said, Taraya, what do you want to do with your life? So as leaders, I beg all of you to be asking your students, to be asking your peers, to be asking the people you manage, to be asking the people you work for, what is it that we can do with our lives to have impact and make a difference? The second question is, how can I do the impossible? Now, this isn't a question to ask just for doing the impossible for impossibility's sake. But when impossibility starts to cloud your vision, when it starts to darken your dreams and hamper your goals, you have to ask yourself, how can you do the impossible? And here's a fun story of somebody that asked themselves just that. Whoops, this is sensitive. So this is called the Hope-Ding device. There were 2 young women, Teresa and Anna. They were students in Switzerland at the University of Lund. And they were bicycle enthusiasts. They loved to ride bikes, but they hated the helmets. They hated how bulky they were and messed up their hair. So they were industrial design students, and they told a professor, we want to create an inflatable bicycle helmet. And they were told, that's impossible. And they said, no, 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 let us try. That's impossible. Over and over they would hear, that's impossible. But they stuck with it. They started working on it in 2005 and spent 7 years engineering, re-engineering, designing this product. What they came up with was a collar that has a little computer built into it. It monitors the bicyclist's motion 200 times per second. If it notices any quick shifts in motion, there's a small gas canister in it. It immediately inflates an airbag that comes up over the head and around the neck to protect the cyclist. So you can kind of see, the picture's not great on the left, but you can see how the helmet then takes shape. It stays inflated so that it will be able to absorb several impacts as somebody's falling. And it's 3 to 4 times greater in shock absorbency capability than a normal helmet. So it's a pretty exciting thing, and it's now retailing for $525. So we'll let you know how it goes. It's new on the market. But it's somebody that said, I'm not going to sit there and close my eyes in the face of impossibility. The next question I'd like for us to all think about is, how can we spread our message? So to ask yourself, how can I do this? How can I not just spread my message because I want people to know my ideas, but then how can I create impact and influence with this? This is a story of a young man who's been very innovative in doing that. He's known as DJ Focus. Have you heard of DJ Focus? No? His real name is Kelvin Doe, and he's a 15-year-old from Sierra Leone. He was the youngest of 5 children, and from an early age, he was always dreaming up inventions that he wanted to create to improve his country. By the time he was 10, he was going through scrap yards and pulling out pieces and making things. Well, at age 13, he figured out how to reverse engineer a battery. So he took metal, he took acid, soda, a tin cup, and a lot of intuition, and was able to craft a battery. With this, he was able to power things in his own house and things for his neighbors. So he's like, okay, I think I might do some other things with it. He gathered old DVD players and played with them and was able to build a 12-volt generator, which he then was able to power up an FM transistor channel and an amplifier, and he started his own radio station. Well, somebody from MIT found out about this young man and said, wow, he's got some things going on here. They went, they saw some of his inventions, they brought him out to Massachusetts, and he was the youngest practicing scholar that has ever come to some of their summer camps. And he was giving lectures to undergrads at Harvard on some of his inventions. So he is back home now, working his radio station with a mission to not just play music, but to also share the stories, because he's a firm believer that innovation will be the thing that will help rebuild his country. So somebody that's doing some great things to spread the message. The next question you can ask yourself, how can I work with others? And we all know that it's important, right? Number 1 for the Fortune 500 list was teamwork, right? But there are some people that don't just ask, how can I work with others? But they are able to ask, how can I leverage the talents of those around me to have a greater impact in the world around me? And here's a man that's done just this, Ivan Subhanujanov. He was working in Denver during 1994, and that was the summer of violence. Do some of you remember that? So there were a lot of gang activity, drugs, violence. It was a hot, sweltering summer. He was out on the streets working with the gang members. And he started talking to them about the work of Desmond Tutu. He was surprised that not only did these gang members know Desmond Tutu, but they knew about his nonviolence philosophies, and they really believed in it. So he had this aha moment, and he thought, why can't I get some of these Nobel Peace Prize laureates to work with me to help engage the youth in nonviolence measures to impact their community? So it was bold. He went, he had meetings with the Dalai Lama, he had meetings with Desmond Tutu, he was able to create this unified force with these Nobel Peace Prize winners, and he launched Peace Jam in 1996. And to this day, they have impacted communities from around the country, and over 1 million students have been involved in community service projects through Peace Jam. So he was able to not just say, how can I work with others, but how can I work with others in a way to leverage strengths to make a difference. Another question that I'd like you to think about and ask yourself is, how can I push my limits? Not just deliver what's expected, what's good, what's great, but how can I deliver the extraordinary? How can I go above and beyond in situations to have an impact? So some of you might know Essie Garrett. She's a local hero here in town, and unfortunately she just passed away 2 weeks ago. I had created a video documentary series about women in the local community sharing their stories with young women, and she was one of the people that we profiled. And I was very fortunate to get to know her rather well, and she was an amazing person. She grew up in Texas. Her mother died and her father left, so it was just Essie and her younger sibling, and they were hungry. So she said they used to go out and steal chickens, steal vegetables, do whatever they could to feed themselves. And she said, I don't know what I'm going to do in my life, but I'm going to make sure people aren't hungry if I can help it. So she joined the service and then settled in Denver, and she said about her mission. During the day, she taught refrigeration mechanics at Emily Griffith, but in her off hours, she started running. And she would run ultra marathons to raise money for charity. Over the course of her time, she ran over 25,000 miles and raised over $1 million just for charities here in Colorado. Here she is presenting a torch that was a launch for Martin Luther King Day celebration to Governor Owens. But she was somebody that just said, I'm going to push myself. And she started a ritual on Thanksgiving in 1991, where the night before Thanksgiving, she would start running laps around the state capitol, and she would run for 48 hours straight, only stopping to eat a little bit and refuel at a food station, but then she'd keep running. So maybe some of you have had the opportunities to see her running around the capitol around Thanksgiving. The last question that we have talked about, and our other speakers have brought out, is this idea, how do I maintain integrity? How do I align my actions in ways that honor my words, that honor my beliefs, that honor who I am and what I need to be doing in this world? And this is an interesting story that kind of aligns with the Tylenol story and the GM story that we've heard. But some of the younger students might not remember this, but Enron, who was a great energy trading company, once valued at $60 billion, came crashing down because of faulty accounting practices, right? So the chief financial officer, Andrew Festov, said when he was indicted for charges because of this, he said, I really didn't think that I was guilty. I didn't think that I had done anything wrong. He said, my job was to take very complex, vague rules and find the business opportunities within them. And he said, you know what? I thought we were geniuses. Until he went to prison and he spent time reflecting. And he said, you know, after time thinking about it, he realized he was asking the wrong questions. He said, I was asking myself, what are the rules and how can I stay within this loose form of these rules and create profit? And he said, I should have been asking, what is the principle? What is the right thing to do? And so as leaders, if we all continue to ask ourselves, what is the right thing to do? I think we're able to shoulder any consequences that come our way because we'll be able to answer ourselves deep in the dark night, knowing we did what we thought was the right thing to do. So the ultimate question then, I think, becomes, how can we live on questions? How can we challenge ourselves to ask the tough questions, to face the impossibilities, and to stay in this place of what the military coined VUCA in the 1990s, the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous times that we face. The state of our world right now is wrought with questions. And as leaders, we're going to be called to embrace those questions and to live those questions. And so I'd like to close with a quote that I love by the poet Rainier Maria Rilke, who wrote this in 1903 in his book, Letters to a Young Poet. And he said, I will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer. So I'd like to just close by asking you all, what are the questions that you can ask, that you can live by, and that you can stand for as you lead your way and your communities into the future?